Canada just did something Washington never expected. It stopped treating the United States as an unshakable fact of nature and started treating it as a risk that must be managed. If you blink, you'll miss it, but this may be the quiet turning point of North American history. For decades, the US-Canada relationship was sold as boring in the best possible way. Stable, predictable. Two advanced democracies sharing the longest undefended border in the world, trading steel, lumber, cars, tourists, and students almost on autopilot. American presidents came and went, but the basic script stayed the same. Canada was the reliable neighbor, and the United States was the anchor of a shared economic space. Donald Trump shattered that script, and his ambassador's own words made the rupture impossible to ignore. When a U.S. ambassador jokes about conquering Canada and calling it the 51st state, that is not diplomacy. It is a moment of imperial nostalgia disguised as humor. It tells Canadians exactly how parts of Trump's circle see them, not as a sovereign partner, but as an unruly province that should be grateful and obedient. And when that same ambassador lectures Canada for interfering in American politics by running ads defending its own interests, the message is unmistakable. Washington reserves the right to hit you, and you should stay quiet while it does. That is why this episode matters. It exposes the deeper logic of Trump-era foreign policy toward allies. Loyalty is measured by submission, and any form of pushback is treated as betrayal. Under that logic, tariffs on steel, aluminum, and key exports were not unfortunate side effects of a broader strategy. They were tools of discipline. Canada was being taught a lesson, but something unexpected happened. Canada did not simply swallow the insult and hope for the best. Instead, we watched the early stages of a strategic rewire. On the surface, it began with anger. Canadians canceling trips, avoiding cross-border shopping, openly questioning whether the United States was still a friend or had become an adversary. Beneath that emotional wave, however, politicians and policymakers started asking a harder question. What if this kind of White House is not a one-off accident, but a risk we have to plan around? That question leads to uncomfortable arithmetic. When roughly 3/4 of your exports go to one country, and that country is suddenly governed by a president who sees trade as a weapon, dependence stops looking like strength. It looks like a vulnerability you can't afford to ignore. That is why you hear a different tone from Ottawa now. When the Prime Minister talks about the end of the decades-long process of ever closer integration with the United States, he is not just posturing for domestic politics. He is telling Canadians that they can no longer build their future on the assumption that Washington will always be a rational, steady partner. So Canada is doing what middle powers do when the ground shifts under their feet, diversifying markets, hardening strategic industries, and investing at home. A massive multi-year investment plan is not just an economic stimulus, it is an insurance policy. New trade deals in Asia and beyond are not a rejection of America, but a quiet acknowledgement that no single partner can be allowed to hold this much leverage again. Here is the irony. Trump's team wanted to prove that America could bully even its closest ally and get away with it. Instead, they may have triggered the very thing they feared most, a more autonomous Canada that is less willing to accept American whims as destiny. The damage is not only measured in lost tourism or disrupted exports. It is embedded in something harder to repair: public perception. Once ordinary Canadians start to see the United States less as a neighbor and more as a volatile superpower next door, every future American leader will have to work twice as hard just to get back to zero. Trust, once broken, does not return on command. For the United States, there is a deeper strategic cost that most cable news panels will never mention. America's real advantage in a dangerous world has never been just its GDP or its military. It has been its network of allies who chose to stand close because they felt respected, consulted, and safe. When Washington treats those allies as punching bags for domestic political theater, it spins down that capital faster than any stimulus check can replenish. And yet, because there are no tanks at the border and no dramatic walkouts from summits, much of the media treats this as a minor trade squabble that will fade with the next news cycle. That misses the point. The most consequential changes in international politics are often the quiet ones, when a friendly nation silently updates its assumptions about you and begins to build a future that does not necessarily include you at the center. Canada is not abandoning the United States. The border is still there, the trade flows will not evaporate overnight, and the security partnership remains real. But the psychological contract has changed. Ottawa is no longer planning on the assumption that Washington will take care of it. It is planning for a world where it might have to take care of itself. That is the story beneath the headlines. Not just a rude ambassador, not just a spike in tariffs, but a structural shift in how a close ally thinks about America itself. And once a country starts to put resilience above reliance, the map of power in its region quietly begins to redraw. So here is the question we all need to ask. Is this just a temporary storm in the Trump era, or are we watching the beginning of a long, slow divorce between Canada and the United States that no future president will be able to fully reverse?